You can if you
Okay.
want.
Good. Where are you?
I am here from DeWitt, Michigan.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Sue. Next up is item 4, which is approval of our meeting agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, LaRose.
I'll support that.
All right, we have a motion to approve our agenda from Commissioner LaRose, second from Commissioner Murphy. Any changes to that agenda? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up would be approval of our February 11th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Support?
And we have a motion to approve from Commissioner LaRose, a second from Commissioner Grissom. Any changes to those minutes? All right, seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up is call to the public. If anybody with us this evening would like to speak to the Planning Commission in regards to item 7A, which is the Villas of Heartland, which is the only thing on the agenda, please hold your comments till that time. There is a public comment section in that particular agenda item. So would anybody like to speak to the Planning Commission on anything other than the Villas of Heartland agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the call to the public. And now what we're going to do is move on to item 7A, which is a public hearing for a site plan. And I just wanted to take a minute and explain how a public hearing works here in Heartland. It works this way in actually every community, those that have never attended one before. In a moment, I'm going to open the public hearing, and we've got some structure to it. The first section of the public hearing, our township planner is going to introduce the project to everybody. Most of you have researched it. Most of you know a little bit about it. He's going to give us a broad overview of that particular application. Then the second item on that public hearing is going to be the actual applicant or his representative will be allowed to add any comments, any statements they would like to make. The third section of the public hearing is where you can get involved and you can participate. So if you have any questions, comments for, against, any statements you would like to make in regards to this particular item, that's where we'll do it. At that point in time, given the crowd we have here, and I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak, we do it in an orderly fashion. I don't know how to do this any other way than say, maybe we'll raise our hand or call on you. The meeting will be yours at that point. We'll ask you to give us your name and address and make the statements that you want. There won't be any interaction at that point between Planning Commission, the applicant, or our township planner. We're going to be taking notes on all the comments you have. And when we're done with all the comments that we have from the public here tonight, then we're going to close the public hearing and we'll move to another section of this meeting, which is going to be the actual review of the actual application itself. During that time, the conversation is going to pretty much be with the Planning Commission, the applicant, their representative, and the township planner. So your questions will have come before that point. And then after all that's said and done, later in the meeting, we'll have another call to the public on anything additional you'd like to make. So with that being said, at this point in time, what I'd like to do is open the public hearing at 7:11 p.m. for the applicant Joseph Rotundo for the Villas of Heartland. These are tax ID numbers 4708-19-300-013 and 4708-19-300-014. The applicant is proposing to develop both of the parcels of approximately 24.51 acres into a 55-unit single-family residential site condominium plan development. And just for the record, all of our public notice requirements for this public hearing have been met. So with that, we're going to do the first step now, which is we're going to turn the meeting over to our planning director, Troy Langer.
Thank you. Let me start off by just generally explaining where this project is located. It's located north of M59 and it's located to the east of Hacker Road. And then immediately to the east of this property would be the Walnut Ridge Estate subdivision. The applicant, as it was mentioned, is proposing to develop this property as a single-family residential development with 55 units. The process that the applicant is proposing here is what's referred to as a planned development, or more commonly just a PD here with Heartland Township. That process is, it essentially is a three-step process. The first part of that process is the conceptual review. That is where the applicant brings in a general concept plan that goes before our planning commission. No formal decision or recommendation is made. Instead, any comments or concerns are shared by the planning commission to the applicant. And then after that, the applicant proceeds to the township board, again, for conceptual review, where a very similar process occurs with the township board. This applicant has already completed that conceptual review. He did that in, I think it was 2019. And now the next phase of it is the preliminary review, which is the phase we are in right now. This is where now the applicant has decided to invest a little more money in the site plan and provide a lot more detailed information as part of it. He submits that. There's a public hearing, which we are in right now. The Planning Commission will hear this case, will discuss this case, and then ultimately the Planning Commission will actually make a recommendation, and then this will go on to the Township Board at a future meeting where the Township Board will undertake and review the Planning Commission's recommendation and then also make an actual determination on that. And then the last step is the final part of the plan development. And at that point, we're no longer really looking at any of the site plans. We're more or less focusing on the master deed, the plan development agreement, any cross-access agreements, and other documents that are typically recorded as part of that. So for this purpose right now, we're in that middle phase where we're looking at the actual site plan. The site plan, as I mentioned, 55 units, single family, residential. And with that, I'll be available to answer any questions or comments you might have.
All right. Thank you, Troy. Now we're going to move on to that second phase, and this is where the applicant or their representative, and I have seen Wayne Perry on here, is allowed to add anything else that they would like to add to the actual meeting this evening. So Wayne, I see you out there.
Good evening, Mr. Fox. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you.
As was previously mentioned and has been written up in great detail, this development is at the preliminary stage. I am here representing Mr. Rotundo this evening, who is the developer of the property. As I think probably everybody is aware, this development is currently proposed as a condominium development, 55 units. Private roads is proposed currently as a gated community. And Mr. Rotundo feels this development provides a style of ownership that's desired by buyers and homeowners in today's market. So high quality single family residential homes without the large lawn areas typical of large lot subdivisions that have been developed in the community. With that, I don't have anything else to add, Mr. Chairman. I'm here for any questions you might have as the meeting proceeds.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Perry. The next up is the third piece of the meeting, which is the public comment. A couple things before we get going there. We do want to let everybody know that we received a reasonably large number of letters, emails in regards to this particular development. And be assured that every one of those is going to be actually formally embedded as part of the record of this particular meeting. So all of those that are or aren't watching that did send some written documentation, those will also be included in any of the notes and any of the records that we have for this evening's meeting. So what we're going to do is open up to the point that of the meeting where you as residents are allowed to speak for or against, or whatever comments you'd like to make on this. As I said, we've got a rather large group. Some people don't have video on, so we'll try and work around those. But if you would like to say something, I don't know how to do this any other way than to say, raise your hand. If we were in person, it'd be a lot easier. But if you'd like to speak, we'd like your name, your street address, and the comments that you'd like to make. So is there anybody out there that would like to speak this evening? Anybody that does not have their video on that wants to turn their audio on and make a comment? Oh, I see there, Mr. Henry Nykel.
Yes, this is, we have quite a few more people that are trying to sign on. They're not able to get
Okay.
in. I just want to bring that up.
Okay,
It's like at least 3 others. They're having problems connecting with the website.
okay.
This is not about
Um,
anything else other than that.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to address the commission this evening?
Jim
Okay,
Jablonski, I would.
How about a Roger Myers? I see you there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fox. My name is Roger Myers, 915 North Michigan Avenue in Howell. I am the attorney that was retained by the Walnut Ridge Estates Condominium Association to address issues relating to the impact on that condominium. I did submit a letter dated February 24, 2021. I believe it's part of the packet that everyone has seen. I don't intend to repeat everything that was set forth in that letter. I just wanted to highlight a couple of issues. Really, the biggest issue that is concerning to the association is the proposed connecting road between the 2 subdivisions, between the 2 condominiums, that will have an unrestricted motion activated gate. I'm sure there's going to be other residents of Walnut Ridge Estates that are going to speak this evening regarding their individual concerns regarding how that will impact them. It's not my intention to go over that. I just really want to address it from the legal perspective. The concern and really the objection is as it relates to what has been proposed for that connecting road and the unrestricted motion activated gate is that it will allow traffic and essentially members of the public to use the private roads of Walnut Ridge Estates for which there is no dedicated easement. The Walnut Ridge Estates roads are private. I included in the letter that I submitted the specific sections of their master deed, which provide the very limited scope of the easement for the type of traffic that can actually use those private roads. And it's basically limited to emergency access. The church has a right to use the roads, the Grimlau Church. The development obviously originally was property that was owned by the church, but that's the limited basis for the use of those roads. It's also very clear that the easement is not to be interpreted as granting access and easement over the roads to the public. The problem is as proposed, the gate with the full connectivity road does not in any manner limit the access or use of those the Walnut Ridge Estates roads to the scope of the easement that was reserved and granted. And so the association does object to that portion of the project because it will not, ultimately what will happen is you will end up having members of the public will be traversing over the internal roads of Walnut Ridge Estates, which will technically be a trespassing every time somebody does actually use those roads beyond the scope of what was reserved in the master deed. I saw the recommendation memo from Mr. Langer. He specifically identifies as a condition to his recommendation, condition or contingency number 6, and that is that that contingency would require the applicant to secure the necessary ingress egress easement with Walnut Ridge Estates in order to permit the approval and the use of those roads with the proposed connecting road and the gate. And I can tell you that not only will the association be unwilling to grant such an easement, the association really has no legal obligation to grant that easement. As set forth in my letter, the association they have no objection overall to the development, and they also have no objection to the approval of this plan with a restricted access gate as opposed to an unrestricted motion activated gate. The association would consent to an unpaved emergency access connector between the two condominiums, which would provide the emergency access that would be needed for that project. The gate could be unlocked, as is the current gate between the two developments, or between the church and Walnut Ridge Estates. So basically, what would be acceptable would be what is already there now in the connecting emergency access between the church and Walnut Ridge Estates. So I just wanted to reiterate that even if the approval is ultimately granted, that's the contingency number 6 is going to be a legal impossibility because the association is just not going to enter into an easement agreement that would facilitate that type of public access over their roads. I appreciate the commissioner's time this evening on behalf of the association, and I know that there are others the other residents that do want to address this issue as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Anyone else? Mr. Jablonski?
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me okay? So good evening, commissioners. My name is Jim Jablonski, and my address is 2345 North Hacker in Osceola Township, across the road from the proposed development. By the way, thank you for allowing your neighbors from Osceola Township to participate in this process.
Mm-hmm.
My comments are included in the meeting packet on pages 116 through 118. And in particular, on page 118, you'll find a slide I created to help illustrate some of my concerns. And again, I don't plan on going over all that tonight, but I'd like to highlight a few things if I could. The biggest point is that today on the proposed site, rainwater is absorbed in the 24-acre field, and then it's collected in several wetlands. The plan calls for filling these two wetlands and for the rainwater to be directed instead through storm drains to a retention basin. The retention basin will be directly across the street and adjacent to a 12-inch culvert that flows under Hacker Road and onto my property. During the spring thaw and after heavy rainfalls, water from the culvert creates a seasonal creek that splits my property and then drains into a private pond behind my house, shared by me and my neighbor, Henry Nichol. This pond is a regulated wetland. It's teeming with fish and aquatic mammals and is a stopover for migratory ducks. In fact, this morning, the first bufflehead duck of the season arrived on the pond. In a few weeks, there'll be dozens stopping over on the way north for the summer. The pond is a small but marvelous example of the beauty of God's creation right here in Livingston County. Unfortunately, the proposed development creates tangible risk to this pond. The upsetting of the natural distribution of rainwater will lead to a change in the volume of water flowing into it. And probably worse, once 55 new homes are occupied, road salt, fertilizer, and other pollutants will enter the storm drains and flow into the retention basin that's planned. If this basin overflows into the culvert, it will harm the pond on Mr. Nichol and my properties. I'm not asking the development of the property, I'm not against the development of the property, but I feel it should be done responsibly and shouldn't impact your neighbors or, of course, the environment. There are steps the Planning Commission can require to ensure this. You could require a wetlands review from Eagle. In the proposed plan, 2 wetlands to be filled are identified as unregulated. However, it's my understanding that any wetland within 500 feet of another wetland greater than an acre, as is the pond in my backyard, is a regulated wetland. This means the 2 wetlands planned to be filled are indeed regulated, and as such, a permit from Eagle is required to fill, drain, or construct a structure on them. An alternative would be to have the builder look into the feasibility of connecting to the Browning drain along M59. This is just a few hundred feet south of the planned development. Also, I see a draft HOA agreement in the meeting packet. Some of my concerns can be addressed by adding to the restrictions. For example, perpetual maintenance of the planned basin could easily be memorialized in the bylaws and funded through association dues. This will ensure the pond in my backyard is protected in perpetuity. I mentioned there are certain times of the year the seasonal creek is actively flowing from the culvert. This week, in fact, is a really good example. The recently melted snow and the rain this morning have generated some activity. I welcome members of this commission to visit my property and see it for yourself. In fact, I encourage you to do so before approving this plan. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just to raise a hand. Yes, Mr. Nykel again. Mic's off.
All right, now we got it, right? Okay.
Okay.
My name is 27. I'm this development. So I'm asking my presentation and thing that biggest concern that is filling in the wetlands and the water runoff. These wetlands are indispensable and fragile resources that act as filters for the environment, plus the habitat and the wildlife. I believe this plan is inconsistent with the Heartland Township 2004 Comprehensive Plan in the section Natural Resource Conservation and Recreation section. There's approximately 1.5 acres of surface area at an unknown depth that will no longer be retained on that property during high water times, snow melt, and heavy rain. This means that less water will be retained because of all the hard surface area will now allow water to be absorbed into the ground but flow to the retention pond, such as roof to gutters and gutters to street water, and collecting along with whatever contaminant it picks up along the way: salt, calcium, antifreeze, other automotive fluids, fertilizers, and other unknown contaminants. Flow through the
Not talking.
And will pass on through my neighbors and my property to our regulated wetland pond. My pond is a healthy source of water for fish, mammals, reptiles, and migratory waterfowl. I don't want any foreign contaminants to flow into the pond and change its ecological balance from its current state. So the only way to know what the current state is to have the water tested by a reputable company, to get current baseline before the construction starts, and it continued being tested for an agreed upon time after the development. I see this as a responsibility of the developer to protect the environment of his development. There should be a study completed to mitigate future problems, including a modeling of the water surface in the wetland areas to determine how much water can be kept on the development property and hold the water there as long as possible. In the 40+ years our houses have been here, we've never had any flooding in our houses. There is a potential for this if there's not enough water being retained on the development property. What assurances can be in place in case of flooding? Is the builder going to take out flood insurance policies on our homes? That's now the next thing is the traffic. It's for 55 homes in development. That means at least 110 vehicles plus coming from the village of Heartland. And it's my understanding that township guidelines for this calculation is 11 trips per minute. 5 homes is 605 trips a day. And since there will be pass through from Walnut Ridge, this will invite more vehicles to cut through. This will greatly impact the traffic at M59 at the light at Hacker Road, adding to the traffic which the church parishioners from St. John's potentially backing up the left turn lane onto 59 and from 59 left turn into Hacker. So is there going to be a traffic study about this? Thank you for your time and looking forward to working with you on this.
Thank you very much. Anyone else this evening? Just a show of hands if you do. Yes, Mr. Quigley?
Yes. Good evening. My name is James Quigley. I live at 2150 North Hacker Road. I own the farm immediately adjacent on the south side to this proposed development. I have 3 points to make. One is foot traffic on Hacker Road. There are joggers that go up and down Hacker Road through probably 9 or 10 months of the year. But in the warm weather, you may not be aware, but there is a playground at the Catholic Church, very nice playground, slides, swings, different stuff, and it's very well illuminated at night. And there are kids that ride their bicycles or come down on foot. Other kids are brought down by their mother in an automobile. So you have foot traffic along Hacker Road of kids. In addition to that, you have foot traffic from senior citizens and mature people, couples that are just out for exercise. So there's a safety issue here involving foot traffic. The next issue is vehicle traffic, and I am not enthused at all about the potential for 600 odd vehicle trips past my property each day. It does not appeal to me very well, but I've owned it, I think 42 years, I believe it is. Third possibility that I want to bring up is trespassing from people. I am constantly bothered by people who want to illegally hunt on my property. My property is posted. In addition, because the development potentially would be so close, that you would get a lot of curiosity seekers, young people and others that might want to come on my property and do whatever. I once mentioned that a number of years ago there was a patch of marijuana being illegally grown on my farm. I mentioned that because that's simply typical of the kind of trespassing that I might have to deal with. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Quigley. Anybody else this evening? Show of hands. Okay, I'm not getting your last name. Your first name's Derek.
Hi there, it's Derek Niederquell. I'm at 2387 Walnut View Drive in Heartland. Just sharing my opposition of the connecting road. I did submit a letter. So many youth and kids in our neighborhood here, and I just want to reiterate the fact that having a connecting road will increase traffic significantly. Folks using our sub as a shortcut, if you will, to Hacker. Our community is a safe place where kids are riding bikes, walking, etc. We have a community bus stop as well, so folks leaving for work will use our sub as a shortcut. And I think it's just a safe community that we have now, and strongly oppose the connection road. That's all I have. Thank you for hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, anyone else? Sure, I see a Gary and a Sue, but I don't see a last name, so your turn. Oops, your mic, there you go.
I'm Sue Leroy. I live at 2488 Walnut View Road. And I am strongly opposed to an open road, a free road to our subdivisions. We moved here because it was a small subdivision. It was a closed subdivision, and we have multiple, I can't tell you how many kids are in our subdivision in the spring and summer. They're playing, they're going back and forth. Kids are kids, and even though we teach our kids to look twice and listen for traffic, that doesn't happen. And there is going to be a child hit. I know it, I feel it, and it is wrong to put a thoroughfare through this subdivision. It will not save 1 iota of traffic on 59. We're talking about a quarter-mile stretch between Hacker, the corner of Hacker where that light is, and the opening of our subdivision. So if your goal is to save traffic on 59, this isn't how you do it. I'm worried about my grandkids. I have 8 grandkids. They're over here all the time. We were riding bikes today. We're virtual schooling and they were riding bikes today through our subdivision. The other thing is we're private and we have no police protection here as far as somebody's going to be patrolling our streets to make sure that people coming through here are driving 20 miles an hour and looking for kids. So, that might be, if you do approve this, I will be asking you for some police protection also. I just hope that you listen to all of us and can really feel how unsafe this is going to be. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm glad that you opened up the meeting to all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you. Next, anyone else? Yes, you're labeled Walnut Ridge.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. My name is.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Joe Naparelski. I live at 2280 Walnut View Drive in Walnut Ridge Estates. Thank you, Township Committee members, for hearing our voices tonight. Mr. Langer for taking all of our emails, as well as our representative from the HOA Association and all the background and follow-up that he has done for us too as well. Thank you for hearing our voice. Just to echo the comments from the rest of the members that have presented for the annex, I strongly oppose the annex being added with or without a gate. I strongly oppose any gate or annex being added, just from the fact of not just the speeding point, but the speeding point could be, obviously any member, even myself, could speed through our own subdivision. So you maybe will using also, but at the same time, within Walnut Ridge, I have at least I have a leg to stand on where I can go to our HOA board, or I can go to that neighbor within the subdivision if that person or their child is speeding through the subdivision, and I can address it through means that I can at least control or do something about. However, I cannot go next door to the subdivision that's annexed and pick a fight or address my concerns with that homeowner, because that homeowner could say basically, who cares? Not my problem, so what? So that's one point. And then additionally, in the letter that I also mentioned as well, our subdivision will be finished with construction this year after 5 years. With the annex being in place, a gate won't be installed until the end of the subdivision is completed. Therefore, we will instill at least another 4 to 5 years of construction, which includes gravel haulers, skilled trades, other traffic through the subdivision off of US 23. And that is obviously not something that the homeowners in Walnut Ridge want to continue. They're excited about the sub being finished and completed. Additionally, road maintenance and deterioration was also mentioned. That is obviously common sense. If we have more traffic, including gravel haulers, etc., our roads will deteriorate, and we are on an HOA, so that means the homeowners will be paying for their own road improvements. And then finally, the secondary access point, I may have not dug enough on the background. I do apologize from Mr. Rotondo. I don't really understand why there needs to be, or why is the requirement for that annex to be added or built in connection with Walnut Ridge. So I guess I'm not clear on that point as well, and why the necessity of an annex point does need to be given or granted through Walnut Ridge's subdivision. I think those are my points. Thank you very much for hearing us. And again, Mr. Langer, thank you for accepting our emails and our letters.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, anyone else? If you don't have your video on, turn your mic off and say my turn, and we'll get you online, or we'll get you in the meeting. Okay. Oh, I see Mr. DPAT. Oops, your mic's off. Turn your mic on. Sir, could you turn your microphone on? Nope. There you go.
Hear me now?
There
Okay.
you go.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Pate, 2550 Walnut View Drive in Heartland Estates. I'm actually the president of the HOA, and I helped retain Mr. Myers. He's covered most of the legal issues, and I just want to emphasize that I can't tell you the number of homeowners in this subdivision that have had contact with me either by email or walking throughout the community that are opposed to this this connecting road that's proposed between the two subdivisions. Most of the concerns, as you've heard, are traffic and safety. And I have a lot of concerns about that because I know what's going to happen. We're going to have constant traffic flow between the two communities. And no matter how you cut it, it's exactly what's going to happen. As one of the homeowners just indicated, we're just finishing construction right now. It'll be done in the spring. The last 5 or 6 homes are being constructed. They're all sold. And we're all looking forward to the construction zone finally ending. Now you're looking at another 3, 4, 5 years of that again. I think that our homeowners they're done with construction. And all the things that it brings with it. The heavy loads, the trucks, the wear and tear on the roads that we're gonna have to deal with, the trucks early in the morning. It's not fair to the homeowners to have that occur again. We've looked at maintenance of these roads. We know that in 15 years, give or take, we're gonna have to spend about, estimate $250,000 to recap these roads. We know what that cost is. We've looked at it. It's gonna be exacerbated by the trucks and the additional traffic. It's going to happen sooner. And again, these are private roads. These are not township roads. And it's going to cost us money, and the township's not going to pay for that. As we've seen for other issues, we're putting in a street light at our cost. We're putting in a street sign at our cost. We don't want the connecting road, and I don't see the necessity. There's another community on the other side of us. Actually, it's owned by Joe Rotundo. There's no connecting road into that subdivision. In fact, if you drive around the various subdivisions, you're going to find there are no open connecting roads in the majority of those other subdivisions. So many of the homeowners ask me, why suddenly has this become a overriding issue that we need to accommodate? And as Roger Myers indicated, we are not inclined to grant an easement over anything that we have control of, and that's primarily our roads. I think there's also a church representative on here that may want to talk, Mr. Frago, because part of that land that is between the two subdivisions, the one proposed and ours, is owned by the church. And I think that they may want to comment on that as well. So I want to thank Troy Langer for being very cooperative over the last 2-3 months, providing me information and meeting with me a couple of times, and our attorney, very accommodating. I really appreciate your help. And I want to thank the township commissioners for listening to our comments and allowing us to have this public comment period. Thank you very much.
Well, you are welcome, and thank you. Anyone else this evening? Usually one per person, but it looks like you got a guest there, Mr. Nykel. Is he taking a turn? Can't hear you.
Okay, you hear us now?
We can. Now, usually we have one time slot per person. Does your other individual there wish to speak?
He cannot get on. He's been trying to.
Okay.
He's a.
All right.
Next door, and from other townships trying to get in, it's locking people out. They are
Okay.
definitely
Well,
trying to get in the website. So I want to make you aware. I'm going to let him have the floor.
absolutely. If you give us your name and address, sir, then the meeting is yours.
Okay, I just had a couple of comments. I submitted this online too, but I thought I'd go ahead and read it in the minutes. My name is Stephen Cotter. I live at 2255 North Hacker Road, directly across the street from the Villas of Heartland planned development. I feel we are some of the people that will be most affected by this development, and I would like to go on the record as being strongly against it. One of the main reasons I purchased my house in this area was due to the zoning being single-family homes with a minimum of 2 acres of property. I believe this planned development is totally contrary to the original intent for this area and is very upsetting to me personally. Additionally, I am against this planned development for other reasons which are very concerning to me, which include construction noise that will affect the quality of life of my neighbors and my family for at least 2 years, the substantially increased traffic to this area, the density of this planned development, the light pollution that will take place mainly due to the cars driving in and out of the development, and the fact that the living room is directly across the street. The destruction of 2 small wetland areas that are used by waterfowl and other wildlife area. The negative impact that the runoff from this development may have on the natural pond that, although I do not own, I can see from my house and gives me enjoyment. Again, I'm strongly against this planned development and the many negative effects it will have on my neighbors, myself, and the environment for many years to come. If this planned development is approved, I strongly request and hope you would seriously consider these 2 changes to the plan. Number 1, improve the buffer between planned development and Hacker Road to include a berm with multiple rows of evergreens. This will act as a buffer for the light pollution and noise that will be generated from this development and intruding into my house. Possibly consider moving the entrance and exit as far south as possible, where there would be undeveloped across the street from the entrance. Thank you for your consideration of the negative effects that this planned development will have on my neighbors and
Okay. Well, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Courtney, can't see your last name, but Courtney, the meeting is yours.
All right, thank you. Hello, I'm Courtney Sampson, 2171 Walnut Ridge Drive. Thank you for having us. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of my neighbors' concerns. And for me personally, it really is about safety. When looking to move to Heartland or, the Brighton area, I was looking for a small subdivision. And I purposely chose Walnut Ridge because I think it was about 64 homes. And again, enclosed, private, and not having to worry about that through traffic. Hearing the word 605 trips per day that potentially are cutting through our neighborhood just freaks me out. I have a 5-year-old who's trying to figure out how to learn how to ride a bike. It's not going well. So he is on the side of the road at all times, maybe falling over. And I'm just picturing the disaster this is going to become of traffic just coming in, out, in, out, in, out. And, I echo the concerns. A child is going to get hit. When you've got traffic flying through a subdivision, you are putting children that are running house to house, yard to yard at risk. And honestly, I just feel like it's a little bit of a bait and switch. If we're connecting almost a subdivision the exact size of ours, it's like doubling our size. And it's shocking to me that we're even talking about it. But I do, appreciate the opportunity to talk it through. So I just wanted to make sure my concerns were expressed. I appreciate my email being received and read, and appreciate everyone listening. So thank you.
You are welcome. Anyone else this evening? Gary, do you want to have a turn? I think Sue took one, but you can have one if you'd like.
Yes, please. Gary,
are...
I live at 2488 Walnut View Drive, same as Sue. We sent a letter in. I'm not going to read the letter to you. One thing I wanted to highlight that hasn't been brought up is that our subdivision was approved and built with sidewalks on just one side of the road. Not sure why the township did that, Don't know if any of you were around when that happened, but that guarantees that half the sub has to walk across the street through traffic to get to a sidewalk. Again, safety is a big concern. That makes it just that much worse. So I know your intent in connecting subs is not to create shortcuts and thoroughfares, but the unintended consequence of this will be traffic flow from Hacker Road to M59 through both subs, and that's dangerous. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you. Anyone else this evening? Oh, Aaron. We'll go with Aaron.
All right.
The meeting's yours, Aaron.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We just wanted to reiterate the fact that the connecting road, we view it as unnecessary and we'd like to strongly oppose it. We moved to this neighborhood like everyone else. It was a nice, small, closed environment. And we have kids that are just dying to get outside and go play with everyone now that the snow is melting. And we just want to make sure that they stay safe and we don't have to worry about cars flying up and down the roads and through the neighborhoods. Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else?
I have my video on, but evidently you can't hear me. This is Chris Lucier. Can you recognize me to speak?
Yep, Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
This is Chris Lucier. I live at 2468 Walnut View. And everyone's talked about, and the thing that I'm most concerned with is the connector road and the safety of the children. But I wanted to kind of bring the Planning Commission into our neighborhood because it is a special place. And the open playing and the kids all playing, last week there were kids playing football and baseball out in their front yards. And as you know, footballs bounce different places and things like that. But that's just the nature of the type of day that we had here. My wife and I moved here 2 years ago when I retired from my job in Pennsylvania because of my wife's terminal illness and to be closer to our sons and our grandchildren in Ypsilanti and here in Howell. And we already had a condo that we were going back and forth to in Howell, and it wasn't an over 55 community. You can't see me. And I'm a younger man than 55. No, not really. Today's my 63rd birthday, actually. So, we had a condo, but, it wasn't a 55 community, but it felt like it. And there weren't young families around. There weren't kids yelling and screaming and running and bikes and all the things that, quite frankly, just, we had 4 children that made us feel like this is a family place. This is where families are from. And we're very fortunate to find this development here in Walnut Ridge. We moved in 2 years ago, as I said, and my wife's mobility continued to decline to where she couldn't take walks. But I would walk our little dog around, and the kids love our little dog called Rascal. And they'll run down there and play with them and all that. And they, if it took me more than 15 minutes, she knew that the kids were out playing and she'd ask about what they were doing and all. And it really brightened her day. And in August, she passed away. And our neighborhood is a really young neighborhood. There's a lot of families that just moved in, but the love and the care that they've shown for me made me really think God sent me to this neighborhood. And it's because of the type of neighborhood we live in. It's a family neighborhood. It's the type of neighborhood you want to live in. You want your kids to live in. You want your grandkids to be able to come and visit because it's just a very tight knit. We take care of each other. As I said, it's just a few years old, but you would think that this neighborhood has existed for 40 years with all the same people because that's how much we all take care and watch over each other. And so I think that's the type of residential nature we want in this township. I think that's the one thing that appeals to me about Heartland Township as we got to know it. It's just, you have that feeling. That's the feeling that Heartland Township is all about. And I think you want to preserve that. And the way you preserve that is not by providing open access through another development where children are playing and people are walking dogs and, balls are bouncing into the middle street. So I appreciate the time of the Planning Commission. I did submit a letter, but I wanted you to get a sense of, you all have families, you all live in neighborhoods. I wanted you to give an idea of what it's like to live in our neighborhood.
Well, thank you, Chris, and very sorry for your loss, but thank you for being here this evening. Anyone else this evening? Okay. Anybody that I do not see a face, but I see a name, if you would like to speak, maybe just turn your mic back on and acknowledge that you would like to talk, and we will turn the meeting over to you. I don't want to cut this off too short for anyone.
What about the people on the phone?
Well, they can hear us, so I'm saying if their video isn't on, speak now and let me know that you wish to talk, and we will acknowledge them and turn the meeting over to them. I see some names, but I see mics turned off, but the mics turned off can still hear me. So if you are one of the people that has your video off and your mic is off, please turn your mic on now and request to speak, and we will allow you to do so.
What about the people that are on the phone, that are phone callers?
Well, I'm seeing callers. I'm seeing call-in users 2, 4. I'm seeing call-ins. They do not have video on a phone, but they are here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So what I'm going to do is close the public hearing at this time. And at this moment, it is 7:59 p.m. And we're going to move on to the next phase of the meeting. In this phase of the meeting, what's going to happen is there's going to be a discussion between the representative for the applicant, Mr. Perry. It will be between the planning commissioners and the planning director. So we will not entertain questions or comments or input from the public at this time. What we are going to do is at the end of the meeting, you'll notice if you looked at our agenda, there is an opportunity again at a call to the public. So at that point, if you wish to add something after the segment that we're on right now, that would be the time to do it. So with that being said, what I want to do is first, before we jump into the staff review letter, if everybody wants to grab that dated March 4th, I wanted to explain to everybody here this evening, if you're wondering what the plan development process is here, every community has them. In Heartland Township, you yourself can follow the process that this application and any other one requesting this particular zoning designation of PD is going through. And if you want to check that out for yourself and see what this applicant is having to go through, if you go to the township website of heartlandtwp.com and look across the top and click on Department and Services, and that'll have a drop down. Click on Planning, and then just click on Ordinances, and there you will see Zoning Ordinance. If you click on Zoning Ordinance and look at section 3.1.18, that is the plan development. That will explain all the steps we're going through in detail tonight. So as Troy explained earlier, we're at the preliminary phase of this review, and staff has put together a review letter that follows that particular process in 3.1.18. So if the planning director, Troy, the planning commission, and Mr. Perry are ready, what I'd like to do is begin with the staff letter we have dated March 4th. For the public's benefit, many of the questions or comments you had will be answered, or you'll get a flavor of what's going on if you haven't read this. And as I said, at the end of the meeting, after we're done with this, there will be another opportunity for you to add comments. So if the planning commission and Mr. Perry are ready, I am just going to start this review on packet page number 9 or page 5 of the staff review letter. Everything prior to that is more history of the project and the area and what's gone on and the steps that we're going to go through. So if we look there, we'll see about a third of the way down, eligibility criteria. For use at home, if you were to look at the zoning ordinance as I just described, you would see one of the things we have to look at. The first thing is eligibility criteria. Within the eligibility criteria to become a planned development, you need to take a look at 5 specific topics. And the first one that we're going to look at are the recognizable benefits. Recognizable benefits should be recognized and a substantial benefit to the people within the development and the community itself. And the applicant themselves is required to submit what they perceive or what they would like to present as recognizable benefits. And in this case, Mr. Rotundo has submitted a list of recognizable benefits that he describes as the preservation of natural features. These are low to no maintenance housing, and that those are in demand in Heartland Township. These are more of a luxury home comprised of high building materials, which he believes is a recognizable benefit to the community. And it is providing vehicular and pedestrian connections to the adjacent residential development of Walnut Ridge, plus the sidewalks and the extension of the municipal sewer and water service. So those are the benefits that Mr. Rotundo is presenting. Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission to Mr. Perry or to Troy on those? Okay, the second thing that we look at is the size of the planned development. In Heartland Township, the minimum size is 20 acres unless for some reason the Township Board elects to select something smaller, and those would be very unusual circumstances, but it could happen. In this case, it's not an issue because Mr. Rotundo's proposed project is 24.51 acres. Third item we're going to look at are the use of the public services. Any planned development should not result in an unreasonable use of any of the public services, facilities, or utilities within the township. And at this point, we've identified that in regards to road services, the subdivision or this proposal is accessed by Hacker Road, which is a county road and is certainly built to handle additional traffic. So it would not be putting an undue use on Hacker Road in itself. The second item in there is the municipal sewer, the sanitary sewer. I believe, Troy, they do have a capacity study that was done on 40 units, but it's stating that they will have to or that's the water, that they need to have a study done on 55 units.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
Okay. Municipal sewer, apparently we're going to have to do some upgrading of a lift station.
Yes.
All righty. We did talk about traffic generation. Troy, do you want to touch on that a little bit from our Planning Commission meeting at the Conceptual?
Yeah, so traffic is obviously from tonight, you've heard a lot of comments on traffic. They're anticipating that this development does not rise to the level of requiring a traffic study. So a traffic study was not performed, but also going back, you almost have to go back quite a few years and it predates me when Walnut Ridge was proposed. There was discussions between the developer of Walnut Ridge, which was Capital Construction, and then also this current developer. The thought process at that time, before any construction had occurred, was to have a connection from Walnut Ridge to the west to Hacker Road, where a light would be installed at Hacker Road and M59. The thought process at that time was, as traffic increases on M59, that the residents of Walnut Ridge would have the ability to proceed out to Hacker Road to then head south to M59, and with the aid of a traffic signalized intersection would be able to make left turn movements much safer and more efficient than if they were to come out of their own subdivision onto M59 and try to take a left turn at certain peak hour times. That could be very difficult. So that was the discussion, the thought process way back before even Walnut Ridge was proposed on the traffic. But getting to the traffic study or traffic count, it's not anticipated that this rise to the level to require the applicant to perform an actual traffic study. I hope that answers your question.
Any questions from the commission or Mr. Perry, did you want to add anything?
No,
Oh,
thank you,
Mike.
not at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perry. The fourth item under this particular eligibility criteria is the compatibility with the comprehensive plan. We're going to hit this a little bit heavier on the next page of the review letter. So I'll just state that it shall not have an adverse impact on the comprehensive plan or the future land use map. And while we have a medium suburban density residential classification out of the comprehensive plan for this particular parcel, which would designate a 1 to 2 acre units per parcel or per acre. And Mr. Rotundo's proposal is slightly over that. In the next page, in the next section, we'll talk about this in detail. So I'm just going to state it at that because the detailed conversation on density and comprehensive plan is going to come up here in the next couple minutes. The fifth item under eligibility for a PD is unified control, and Mr. Rotundo has provided that, basically stating and showing that he does have control of both parcels of land, and therefore he would be eligible under that particular criteria. I've now moved over to packet page 11. At the top of the page, another area for everyone's benefit that we look at in a plan development is what we call the plan development design standards. Here we got a lot of things to look at. We got about 10 different things to take a look at, and some of them will have more discussion than others, but needless to say, the first one up are the permitted uses, and that the permitted uses or the proposal shall be consistent with those of the township's comprehensive plan. And it would appear as though the applicant proposing single-family residential would be permitted, and it would be very consistent with a lot of the other developments in the medium suburban residential category. Those would include, just for everyone's benefit, Walnut Ridge, one across the street just down a little to the east, Fiddler's Grove. We've got Autumn Woods. We have all sorts of them in there. Heartland Estates, San Marino, kind of a mix of all sorts of single family type uses. So he would be permitted and it would be fairly consistent. Next one up is item 2 under here is this residential density. And I think this one is best turned over to Troy. And Troy, if you want to talk about the density, this is from the previous page, but now we'll talk about it in a little more depth.
Okay, so the way the density is determined is not by the zoning, but it is by the future land use map designation. And as we discussed on the prior page, the future land use map designation for this is the medium suburban density residential category. That's just a lot of words, but essentially what that means is the density should be capped to 1 to 2, and generally what that means is 2 dwelling units per acre. This project is currently at the 2.24, so it slightly exceeds what the future land use map designation indicates for it. However, with the aid of the planned development, there is the provision in the planned development process to allow an applicant to seek a bonus density up to 40%. And that's what the applicant is seeking with this development. So without the bonus density, he would be capped at 49 dwelling units. With the bonus, he could go up to 69 dwelling units. He is proposed at 55. So the planning commission will need to make a determination, and then ultimately the board will make a determination. And if they grant this density, then it would be consistent with the future land use map designation. If the planning commission decides not to allow the density, then the project would not only exceed the density, but it would be inconsistent with the future land use map designation. And in the staff report, we've outlined some other residential developments that had a similar situation for historical reference for you. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to help answer that.
Any questions for Troy?
No. Mr. Chairman, I don't have questions, but I just wanted to express some concerns about this section. Is now the appropriate time?
It would be. Yes.
As far as granting bonus density, my concerns, I have a few of them. I know there's a waiver request, which I think we'll get to, regarding landscaping requirements. So although the impact isn't huge, I think that I can understand the applicant wanting to maximize the number of houses, but when we're looking at potentially waiving landscaping requirements, but we're accommodating more houses, I'm concerned about that. And then I was also concerned in looking at the grading plan, just trying to understand the drainage between the lots. And I know the houses aren't exactly defined as to where they're going to go, but there are these envelopes shown on the site plan. And I don't have a good comfort level on what I'm seeing, that the drainage between these properties will be adequate, or that there's enough room to work with those lots so that there aren't any issues with that. And so again, you know, increasing a density, I have concerns because of that component. And then the last piece, which I think maybe we touch on later, is that if those homes were built right to the edge of the envelopes as shown on the plans, then that puts those houses pretty close together from the perspective of what our zoning allows as far as distance between houses. I have some concerns with that piece as well. So I just wanted to point those out.
Okay. Mr. Perry, do you have any comments you'd like to add to that or respond at this time or no?
Certainly, and not necessarily in that order, but I appreciate the comments. If we can go in reverse order, only because it's easier to remember the last thing first, the building envelope issue. Here, we're not proposing individual lots with lot lines, but a building envelope. Within the plan set, we've provided house plans, floor plans, elevations, depicting the typical house that will be constructed in here. If you'll notice, those are all smaller than the building envelopes that are shown. The idea here is that everything constructed with regard to the residence needs to be constructed within the building envelope depicted. It doesn't mean that we're going to fill it entirely, because there are things like decks and porches and all those kinds of things that may change. A house may be flipped around. So depicting a specific house within the unit would then require us to come back to the township to change that plan if a future purchaser wanted to build something different. And it's something as simple as adding a deck. Mr. Langer's been through this numerous times on other projects. Simply adding a deck on the back of a house, if we've already defined the specific house, creates a problem. If here the deck and all the improvements are within that envelope, then it can be constructed. The separation between units will not be less than what's depicted, but will probably be more based upon the house sizes we've provided. As to the drainage, the grading plans are provided. All the sites can drain very easily. We're regrading the site to create these house units, our house pads, and drainage will be from the front part of the house toward the road, and from the the front corner all the way to the back. So they do drain conventionally, both toward the road and toward the rear. Lastly, with regard to the landscape waivers we're requesting, we're really not requesting a reduction in any landscaping. We are requesting modifications. That's totally up to the planning commission on whether they want to approve those, but we're not looking for a reduction so much. There's a request to alter 50% of the trees from deciduous trees to 50% evergreens. We personally think it'll end up with a better product with a mix of trees, both deciduous and evergreen. But if the planning commission doesn't agree with us, then we'll put in the deciduous trees. Street trees at the front of the lots simply cannot be placed where the ordinance specifies. So we need a waiver to that. So the landscaping is not really a reduction so much as it needs to work and make a better development. And once again, if you don't agree, then we don't get the waiver. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Michelle, anything else on that?
Mr. Perry, one more question I would have in response to that is if I didn't see it, but maybe I missed it in the bylaws or the master deed, if there is anything regarding any setback requirements or distance between houses or anything like that, as far as the layouts go for the lots.
The setbacks, there aren't really setbacks between the houses. We've offered a separation distance between the building envelopes, which I think the minimum is 14 feet as shown on the plan. That is the minimum separation required between the building envelopes.
Okay, thank you.
Just maybe, excuse me if I missed it, Mr. Perry. The building envelopes are X amount of feet wide. The average home or the widest home you've proposed is Y. So I'm guessing these homes don't stretch end to end, left to right on that building envelope. Would that be a correct assumption from what you just said?
That is correct. I think there's a number of different dimensions on the houses.
Yeah.
I'm not real familiar with the architectural, but they are less than the building envelope we've depicted. That's correct.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving to the design details, they are to be provided. They have provided 3 elevation plans, giving us some direction as to what this particular development would look like. I think we touch on it real briefly at the end of this review in another section. Did everyone have a time to take a look at those, and do you have any comments on that? Mr. Rotundo also built Heartland Estates for those that are not familiar or new to the community. So your neighboring subdivision to the east was built by the same developer proposing to build this one. I think probably the quality of that development speaks to what he's proposing to do here. No other comments. We'll look at these minimum yard setbacks. I think Michelle just touched on one of that along Hacker Road. We have a required setback of 50 feet. The proposal is for 125 feet, so they certainly are compliant, exceeding the minimums required. I'm now moving over to packet page 12. Along the perimeters, but not adjacent to the road. So this is going to be the north-south and the east side abutting Walnut Ridge. 40-foot required as a minimum. The setback on the Walnut Ridge is 50 feet. And we're 41 and 44 feet on the others, so it would appear as though they are exceeding the requirements there. Along internal connector roads, 23.5 feet setback from the private road right away. Are there any questions or comments on the setbacks of these homes? Mic on. There you go.
Mr. Chairman, can you, so thank you very much. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question or a comment pertaining to that topic.
Yes.
But I do have to say, I don't know how I muted my mic, because I just unmuted it. But if I can I go back? This was where I had realized it was unmuted. Can I just go back, to a question, please? And that would, be pertaining to Mr. Perry. And it would be to the envelopes. So can you just clarify what can exceed the envelope?
The only element that would end up exceeding the element or the envelope would be the extension of the driveway that goes to the road. Sidewalks would be another item that, those are not generally considered part of the residential home construction as far as meeting a setback or an envelope requirement. But other than that, the envelope would be required to contain all of the improvements related to that.
Okay, thank you so just an example, I think maybe what you said was driveway, sidewalk, maybe a brick paver walkway, those things would not be considered within the envelope, I'm sure. But any elevated building materials, let's say if it were a deck or if it were an elevated, let's say planter out of hard material.
Yeah, definitely decks, that is an item that was specifically discussed, would have to be in. I'm not sure what you're talking about for elevated planters, but if it's a part of the construction of the house, it's attached to the house, then certainly I think the answer is yes.
Okay, all right, thank you for that, and thank you for allowing me to go back. So if I can, yes. So the question that I had for the setbacks, it was along the internal connector or local road, meaning the standard being 40 and the proposed setback at 23.5. So my comment would be is maybe a comment / concern is that I want to confirm that there's enough room for a parked vehicle that would be up near the, let's say with the garage closed, up against the garage with room to walk between the vehicle and the garage, and the average size vehicle and or maximum size vehicle, and then room to be able to walk behind that with the vehicle not covering the sidewalk. So if we can just picture, the garage face, the vehicle, and that vehicle not exceeding over the sidewalk, and then whatever your boulevard area may look like. So that's a comment that I have, or a concern. With some of the, an average size vehicle, a sedan at 16 feet, and maybe a large SUV at 19 feet, or maybe up to 21. I want to confirm, or I have a concern that for safety reasons, that that a vehicle can park in that location and not exceed onto the sidewalk. So this is.
We believe that's the case, hence we've proposed that dimension, but I mean, I guess I leave that to the decision of the planning commission. There should certainly be enough room between the front of the house and the sidewalk to do that. We've left adequate space.
Okay, so I guess then to do the simple math, if a vehicle can be up to 20 feet in length, and we need room to walk around it, as long as my concern is not to cover the sidewalk. Are there to be sidewalks on both sides of the roads, I understand?
Yeah. There are sidewalks on both sides of the roads, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that's just my comment that is a concern of mine.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? All right, if not, we'll move on to item 5, which is the distance between the buildings. I think Michelle brought that up a few minutes ago, in the 14 feet as a minimum between those structures. Is there any other questions or comments on it? I think her concern has been documented.
Well, Larry, pardon me.
Yes, Mike.
I think that reads 14 feet between the building envelope.
Yes.
Doesn't necessarily mean between buildings.
It could mean buildings if they took two side-by-side lots and pushed the left-hand house to the right and the right-hand house to the left. So it could be a minimum of 14 feet. It probably isn't going to be, is my bet. That's why I was asking the relationship of this envelope width to this house width, because it would make sense if you put the two houses 14 feet apart over on the other side, there's going to be this large distance. And I could see needing flexibility with driveways, what side's the garage on, what's happening. So if I misspoke, I meant the building envelopes.
Okay.
Other comments on that? Anyone? All right, let's move on around to the building height. Certainly that 2 stories, we're going to be well under 35 feet unless those are awful tall floors. So we're thinking we're pretty safe. I know high ceilings are in, but not quite that high. Any comments on that? Nope. Landscaping, we've got a lot of landscaping conversation coming up real quick here, so we'll probably hang on to the landscaping and just do that all at one time if everybody's okay with that. And then open space. I think Troy would be all of a great benefit if you could go through open space with us.
Okay, I'll try. This is a little confusing because we have two ordinances, 2 separate ordinances. First is the CA, Conservation Agricultural Zoning District, which this is zoned, outlines that there shall be a minimum of 85% open space in that district. This obviously does not comply with that provision. Generally, that standard would not be for planned developments. That would be for a more traditional platted subdivision or site condominium that is proposed without the aid of the planned development. So in the planned development regulations, the open space is a minimum of 25%, and then within that, a minimum of 10% for what they call usable open space. And so they've provided a plan that's part of the site plans that goes through that and indicates that they're at 42% of the site for open space and 15.3% at least for usable open space. So it would comply with the PD requirements. And then just to reiterate, it would not comply with the CA zoning district standards. However, that is generally for traditional type developments, not with the aid of the PD.
Okay, any questions on that for Troy? All right, I have turned the page to packet page number 13 or page 9 of the review letter, and I'm on item 9, which is natural features. Troy, I think we'd probably benefit from more of your wisdom.
So on this provision, their impact assessment identifies 2 essentially types of natural features. One would be wetlands, and we've had a number of residents already comment on that. This plan indicates there are 2 types of wetlands. One would be regulated wetlands. The other type that they've identified are non-regulated wetlands. And just in case there's any question, only the state of Michigan, formerly the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, now a department simply known as EGLE, only that entity can make that determination as to whether a wetland is regulated or non-regulated. So there are a series of wetlands in there. The applicant is proposing to to fill some of them and to not fill some others. Also would point out that there is an off-site wetland in the location of this connection road that would connect to Walnut Ridge. There is a wetland in that vicinity that would partially be filled, not completely, but partially filled as a result of that connection road as proposed. And then the other natural feature that's identified is a tree inventory. The applicant is proposing to keep as the wooded areas that are at the exterior portions of it as much as possible. And they've provided a plan to identify where those are, the trees that they intend to keep. So hopefully that helps answer that. But if you have questions, I'll do my best to try and answer.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one comment with the unregulated wetland on the southwest, I think it is. I just wanted to, I guess, express concern at where I see that there's proposed walkouts where the wetlands being filled. I've just seen situations where that turns out poorly, so I would just maybe put caution towards the fact that there are some walkouts proposed there for those future residents, hoping that that is adequately evaluated, that can actually work.
Okay. Mr. Perry, anything on that or anyone else? Okay. Next up, sidewalks and pedestrian access. We can see there we have sidewalks on both sides of the street through this development. We also have a sidewalk proposed to connect on the north side of the future road between Walnut Ridge and the villas of Heartland. So those individuals in both neighborhoods would be able to conveniently walk in each other's subdivisions. Next up, another section that we have to take a look at, which is the requirements for preliminary review. We got a lot of items in there to cover, and some of them we've already touched on, so we'll probably hit them briefly. Others of them are going to take a little more conversation. But if I flip to packet page number 14, page 10 of the staff review letter, the first item up is the stormwater and drainage systems. We've heard a lot about that from the neighbors this evening. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I had some comments on this as well. I already mentioned a couple of things, the walkouts. I just, from the perspective of a wetland area, wanting to be wet and making sure that that doesn't cause a problem where those homes become flooded. The drainage between the homes was a concern that I had mentioned. But the thing that caught my attention, I just want to acknowledge the residents who came forward about concerns across Hacker Road, because I had concerns with that as well. When I was looking at the retention basin, I did see soil boring within that area on the site plans, but it started at 14.5 feet, I think. So I'm not sure what the first 14 feet of depth, what kind of soils there were. And then there was, I think it was the last 1.5 of the soil boring got to sandy soils. So I have a hard time with gaining a comfort level with this site plan. I'm not opposed to the development by any means, but I have a hard time getting comfortable to the point of saying that I'm comfortable that this can work, because I haven't seen an engineering review on the stormwater system. I don't see a full soil boring. I don't see adequate evaluation that retention basin will serve as it's supposed to. And I don't see anything that looks at those downstream impacts. I think that's really crucial when you do have the high flows in that retention basin could overflow, or if the soils aren't adequate and it's not functioning as designed, you really could impact the downstream neighbors as they had commented on. And I was looking at the pond that those residents have commented on that's on their property. And I haven't been out there, so I'm not sure, maybe visually it looks different. But just from the topography that I've looked at, that pond across the street doesn't have much room for increase in elevation before it appears anyway from the topography that you're actually gonna cause potential flooding in homes there. So I do think it's critical to evaluate downstream impacts in a situation like this. So I wanted to comment on that as well. I think that was pretty much it. The soil boring was a main issue, making sure that basin works, and then the downstream impacts. So thank you.
Mr. Perry, any comments?
Certainly. The reason we proposed a retention basin on this site and not a detention basin is specifically to avoid any downstream impacts. This basin has been designed in accordance with the current Livingston County Drain Commission's requirements for retention basins. It not only holds a 100-year storm, but also has the complete 3 foot of freeboard. In fact, in excess of that, will hold at least 2 100-year storms prior to any potential failure ever occurring. The soils on this site are clays on top. There are numerous soil borings that have been done on the property. There are clays on top and there's sand underneath. All the way to the east, all of the residents in Heartland Estates, Mr. Fox, you mentioned that development a number of times. We've done all those developments through there. There's lots of sand below the clay. Septic fields for all of those residential units in the Heartland Estates development were founded in the sand layers that are beneath the clay. It's extensive, continues over to this property. The soil borings we provided, if you didn't get a good copy of the soil borings, we can provide you copies right from the driller. There's great sand down there, more than capable of taking infiltrating the runoff. Additionally, the Drain Commissioner now requires that we create an infiltration chamber system at the bottom of this basin in the sand, so that even if the native sands in the bottom of the basin begin to plug off, the retention basin doesn't fail from an infiltration standpoint. It continues to infiltrate even if there's problems with plugging of the sand layer right in the bottom of the basin, because the infiltration chambers in the bottom that are below that continue to function. So.
Okay.
I have
yes, Troy.
So, Mr. Perry, if you could help me, and again, I'm not an engineer, so just excuse me here, but it does appear on that retention basin that there's like an overflow or a outlet towards Hacker Road, just the way the grades work on that. Can you kind of just address how that might work and what that might serve?
Certainly, that is a requirement of the Livingston County Drain Code. Anytime you build any stormwater management system, whether it's a detention basin, a retention basin, you are required to provide an emergency overflow that would function should it ever need to. Normally, in a detention basin situation, there is a significant possibility that they could be put into use. Detention basins generally do not have infiltration capability. That's why they have an outlet. And they are designed to handle one 100-year storm. This, once again, is designed to hold one 100-year storm only to the high water level, and then there's another over 3 feet of storage for the next 100-year storm. With the infiltration chamber system in the bottom, this system is anticipated never to use the required emergency overflow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other question from the commission for Mr. Perry or Troy on that topic? All righty, then let's move on. Item 2 is fiscal impacts. The applicant is stating that the proposed development will provide taxes to the township, will also provide taxes to the school district, but will probably not impact it much as its primary target is those of 55 and older. There's also a feeling from the applicant that new housing in the township, while some of these residents might be from the township, we're going to free up some other housing in the township as those individuals move on. So net increase of residents, net increase to the businesses in the township itself. So any comments on that?
No.
All righty. Some other things that we need to take a look at. We've got this internal vehicular circulation. This includes everything from the roads that are proposed themselves. I think we're also going to be touching on this secondary access through the, or connecting with the Walnut Ridge Estates. Troy, would you like to comment on that at all? Wherever you are, there you are.
Yeah. So again, it's very difficult to talk about the villas without talking about Walnut Ridge Estates. And going back to when Walnut Ridge Estates was proposed, they have 64 lots, which is enough. It's more than 24, so it is required to have a secondary access as well. There were two options given to that subdivision. One is a emergency access that essentially would connect to the church property, so that in the event their main drive into their subdivision were blocked or hindered, emergency vehicles would have access, a second way to either get in and out of the subdivision. Or conversely, there was a connection to the west to the villas. And essentially, the developer of Walnut Ridge was given an option that whichever way they selected, then the other access could become converted to another home, which would then become the 65th home in Walnut Ridge. There was a timetable put on this. I believe it was 6 years. If the villas did not come forward with their project in that time period, then Capital Construction could put a house on this site where the connection is currently located to the villas. And then that connection to the church would remain as Walnut Ridge's emergency access. The same is true now with the villas. They have more than 24 units. They also need a secondary access. And this connection between the two kind of serves that purpose. And as I've mentioned previously, the thought, and it predates me, but the thought was to allow the residents of Walnut Ridge a safer way to make left turn movements on M59 with the aid of a signalized intersection at Hacker and M59. Also, the design of the villas is what they call a traffic calming, speed reducing type design, where there's not a straight shot through. There's a number of turns that have to be made, and at each turn, traffic would slow down, so it would help reduce speeds through that subdivision. That gives you some of the background on it. The developer for the villas is proposing a gated community. This presents some obstacles as to, well, how do these gates work? How can traffic go through these gates? The current proposal as it is now is these gates would have some sort of an electronic eye that would read vehicles as they approach them, and they would then open for any vehicle. And in the event that there was a loss of power, then the gates could be manually opened if need be. The other concern that was raised, and this was during the conceptual review, is that in the event that these gates did not allow traffic to flow through them, then consideration should be given towards a separate secondary access for the villas. And obviously this is the direction this particular developer is choosing to go, to have the connection between the two subdivisions, the villas and Walnut Ridge Estates. In addition to all that, as I've outlined in the staff report, it is the comprehensive development plan that outlines it is in the best interest of the community to have interconnectivity between the neighborhoods. This would allow, and the thought process with this is to reduce the traffic impact points on the major roads. That would be M59 and Hacker Road, as vehicles traverse between these two subdivisions. And this would be common vehicles that would serve both subdivisions, such as mail delivery or postal delivery vehicles, package delivery, garbage hauling vehicles, as well as school buses and emergency service vehicles that every time they leave this Walnut Ridge subdivision to then enter into the Villas subdivision, there are a series of potential traffic conflicts on M59. Each one of those conflicts represents a potential crash site, and the goal is to limit or minimize the number of those on M59 Hacker Road. And again, I'll reiterate, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that's just general, the general philosophy behind the comprehensive development plan, which encourages walkability and interconnection between subdivisions. And the thought is, if the gates are in fact going to open for anybody, they would act as a speed reducing device and would also still serve that comprehensive plan suggestion. So with that, I'll leave it open. If there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, and I guess I will add in here, since I was on the planning commission at the time that the Walnut Ridge subdivision went through this exact same process that we're doing here, along with several of the other commissioners. So I will give you a little bit of history on it, and you can take the information and digest that as you please. The concept at the time of connecting the neighborhoods while mirroring and mapping and going through the comprehensive plan and aligning with it was that actually Walnut Ridge is the benefactor of the connection. And I can tell you that sitting in several of the meetings that if you think about it in this concept, that it's very unlikely that anybody in the villas of Heartland, the new proposed development, would ever come over to Walnut Ridge to make a left turn to go to Heartland when they could leave out Hacker Road and use a light. It's also very unlikely that they would ever go into Walnut Ridge to come to 59 and make a right turn. So in the conversation and the discussions in the development of the Walnut Ridge subdivision was that Walnut Ridge residents were the big benefactor. They were not going to be on the receiving end of very much traffic other than potentially Sunday church. And quite frankly, it was deemed that how many people in the villas of Heartland, at that time it didn't have that name, would actually be attending church at what at that time wasn't even the church developed. So if you picture that, if you live in the Walnut Ridge subdivision and you need to make a left-hand turn out of your neighborhood at 6:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock at night, whenever the traffic is heaviest on 59, your benefit would have been to run through, cut through your neighboring subdivision and come out safely at a light. Nobody in the villas would ever do that. They already have a light. They have the shortcut to M59. So you got the benefit from the traffic safety standpoint. And I can remember conversations about, and I know we knew at the time that your development, the Walnut Ridge would be a family-oriented subdivision because of the size of the homes and the lots and the square footage and the number of bedrooms. We said, well, as we get all these people in here and these kids grow up and we got all our new teen drivers, all our 16 through 18-year-olds heading to high school in the morning or going back to band practice or football practice or, you know, whatever it was they were returning to school for, did we really want to have them turning left onto M59 during those peak traffic hours? This was a safe alternative. I certainly am hearing what you're saying. I'm just giving you the history of what went into this. So yes, it is about school buses and it is about garbage trucks, but the donor subdivision out of this deal is the villas of Heartland. It is not going to be the Walnut Ridge. And that was the discussion many, many years ago. So that's not stating my position or anything. I'm just sharing with you what went into the concept of your development and why we had discussions about this connector road. So with that, are there any other commissioners or Mr. Terry or Troy that would like to add anything? So without anything there, I am going to turn to packet page number 15, and we are down at the bottom now. Actually, we could probably just flip to packet page number 16 and move on to the landscaping. Probably can touch on each of these as individuals. The first one is our landscaping and our divider medians. There's a proposal there. We have requirements there. The PD does allow some negotiation and some changes in the landscaping format. Are there any comments on that? I'll add one question and maybe Mr. Perry can, he may recall or not for Heartland Estates, but since we're talking about the divider medians, in the entrance to Heartland Estates, before you get to the gates, we have a crossover. So if you aren't going to go in the sub, you can't get the gates open, you can turn around and exit Heartland Estates. So the gates are back far enough from actually Cullen Road. I'm wondering if Mr. Rotundo or whatever, anybody could add some information to that as to whether we should have that same feature here in the villas.
Yeah, at the time, Heartland Estates was developed, the intention of that entry was that it was not open to any vehicle that came up to the gate. If you came up there and you did not belong in that community, if you did not have an access key card, or if the person you were coming to see was not home, you could not gain entry to the community. This is how it was originally conceived. Hence, we needed a way for those vehicles to safely exit the entry area. Additionally, it was initially discussed with the school system that buses were originally not going to go into Heartland Estates. Back when that was first developed, the bus routes did not enter into gated communities. They remained out at the entrance. And so we needed an entrance turnaround that was large enough to facilitate turning around a bus. Here, we don't have that situation. These gates are intended to open to anybody that pulls up. They're here as an aesthetic amenity. But if you come up and you don't know anybody in the community and you drive up to the gate is going to open. And as far as I'm aware, nowadays the school system, the bus program, they do enter these communities, they don't remain out at the road. So we don't really have the benefit or the need for that turn through that we originally had on Heartland Estates.
Okay, great. That explains it well. Thank you. Any comments on the boulevard landscaping? If not, we'll move on to item B, which is our greenbelt landscaping. Questions, comments?
I had some comments on the greenbelt landscape. I went and I drove up and down Hacker Road to get a sense of the neighborhood because I saw that part of the proposal is to extend that paved portion now to the entrance. And when I looked at the character of the road, you know, north of the entrance is a gravel road, which, you know, we heard from some of the residents that people are jogging and walking on. If I scaled it correctly from the drawings, it's only about 20 feet wide. And cradling the road on either side are large, mature hickory and oak trees, which is a huge traffic calming. You know, when you've got that canopy over the trees, it really slows you down. It really feels rural. That's what we're about here. And now, and I understand the desire, they want to extend the asphalt road, and they have to do it per Livingston County road standards. So all of a sudden, you know, once we get now to this neighborhood, the road now is going to continue at 35 feet wide, paved, and now we've got a decel lane and an accelerating lane, you know, south and north of the entrance, and before you know it, the road is 47 feet wide. And that really concerns me because it's starting to feel quite wide. You pick speed up when the road is wide. So this leads into the greenbelt landscaping. The greenbelt landscaping now proposed, we have options on where we can place it. This development is bringing in a water main along the frontage, but there still is room along the frontage to get some trees out next to this very wide road. And I really want to push for that because currently, and I don't know, Troy, if you can go to the landscape plan, but currently where they show the new trees, instead of being 10, 12 feet away from the edge of the road with large oak trees, those trees are now pushed back 50 feet from the road. So all of a sudden now we really have a highway out there. And I'm very concerned for many reasons because it's just going to increase speed. It's going to be not near as safe, and it's not going to have the feel that it has today. And then in addition to that water main that's out there, they've got gravel kind of pads so that I guess the trucks can reach the fire hydrant. So again, we've got another kind of engineered solution out along that road, and it's really undermining the whole character of the frontage. So when I look at that, I just really want to try to see if we can come back, minimize the impact of all this development on the road, get the shade trees as close as we can to the road, cradle it, and try to kind of, you know, bring back the character that's there today.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Item C, canopy trees along the internal road.
Okay. I took some photos of street plantings along the internal roads. I went to both Walnut Ridge and I went over to Heartland Estates. Our ordinance requests that street trees be within 15 feet of the edge of the road for the same reason, so that you can have some trees that get closer to the road to kind of slow people down and create that environment of your street. Now, the way that, you know, and I know Mr. Perry mentioned that they can't plant over the utilities that are in the right of way, but the plan, there we go. So there's, right now, that's Walnut Ridge. That was this last weekend. And you can see the trees are on the other side of the sidewalk. And the development right now is basically when you measure the distance from where those trees are across the street, it's about 100 feet wide. There's nothing here that doesn't feel like a highway. And if you go to a second photo, and this is over at Walnut Ridge where they were able to get the trees next to the road. And here's another one again of Walnut Ridge. And so here comes Heartland Estates. Look at the difference. And these are large trees, so I know that makes a big difference. And we start out small. Here's how it feels with large trees. And then I took a second photo of, you know, the newer development with the smaller trees, but it still does that. It still has that feel. And I thought that, see how that feels? It slows you down. And over time, when those trees get larger, it creates that environment that we want for, you know, when people are using these sidewalks. And not this wide open, when you don't have anything next to the road, you only go faster. So again, I know it can be done, and I'm really pushing to get those trees per our ordinance within 15 feet of the road.
Do you have any input on that? Troy? Wayne?
Certainly, if I can comment, it would actually be Mr. Rotundo's desire, he's already expressed it to me numerous times, to plant the trees between the sidewalk and the road. Unfortunately, the township engineering standards don't allow us to, because you don't allow trees in the public utility easements that are out there. So I'm caught between your ordinance and the desire of both planning commissioners, which I completely understand and agree with, and the engineering standards that will come back and say, no, we have a water main on one side of the road between the sidewalk and the curb as required by your engineering standards. We have a sanitary sewer on the other side of the road between the sidewalk and the curb as required by your engineering standards. And we're not allowed to have trees within 10 feet of either utility. I'm open to do whatever the planning commission would like me to do, but I can't satisfy both this request, which I completely agree with, and the engineering standards.
Wayne, I have a question for you. In the other communities you deal with, are they different?
Yes, often sewer is underneath the pavement itself. Heartland does not currently allow that, or I shouldn't say you don't allow it, but you don't favor that as the placement of sanitary sewer. Its placement is preferred back of curb. Same with water main. And, or we have communities that don't restrict the placement of trees within public utilities. There's lots of variability here. So tell me what you'd like. I'd be happy to place the trees wherever you choose.
So if I could comment on that, we did reach out to the Public Works Director and talk with him about that. And he did reiterate it is not desirable to install trees on top of either a water main or sewer main. But he did look at the depth of either of those and was willing to work with that to find a place there if that is what the planning commission wanted to do.
Comments, anyone?
Well, I agree with Sue. I'm much more appreciative of seeing a row of trees between the curb and the sidewalk versus the sidewalk and then a tree. So I agree with Sue that it's much more pleasant to drive down that particular entrance to the subdivision versus the latter. So I would suggest that we could work with the engineering department of Heartland and find an accommodation for planting the trees with the utility right away. I'd be agreeable to that.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so yes, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Sue, and I surely appreciate her comments. And you know, whether it's the entrance to the area off of Hacker Road or to the placement of trees inboard of the sidewalk, I would be completely in agreement with her and Michael's comments.
Okay, Michelle?
Mr. Chairman, I would honestly be opposed to putting trees over the infrastructure. It makes it much more costly to repair when you have to dig it up, and people get very attached to trees, and it can cause some issues. And I think it would, if you ever had to do a repair on a sewer system or a water system and you have to tear down the tree, you're going to have some people pretty upset over that. So and it just adds cost, honestly. So my preference would be to avoid the utilities. And they can also, I mean, the reason for it as well is not just for when you have to do repairs, but the root intrusion can actually cause a problem on the system.
Michelle, I'm going to just slightly disagree with you. The utilities are down quite deep, as Wayne has suggested. And typically the root stays in the top 3 feet, where I think the utilities down are about 5. And I don't find that it's that expensive if you do have to remove a tree to, repair a utility. It doesn't happen that often on many different developments. You know, it's with that understanding when they plant the tree. So if there is a problem where they have to access the utility, and then the tree goes, it's kind of written in, and it's always been a non-issue in everything I've been involved with. And I would like to push the same idea for along Hacker Road as well, so that we get those trees a lot closer to the road. There's a water main easement out there. It's deep. There is even room in between the water main easement and the road edge. And I really, really want to push for trying to get those trees closer and keep that character to our heartland, character that belongs on these roads.
Any other comments, input? Bob, Township Manager.
Thank you. Good evening. And I know the Public Works Department over there at Heartland somewhat well. You guys, they do a good job, but and I just want to kind of add the positioning for that was both the water main, sewer main, but also the private infrastructure within there. I can tell you countless sidewalk repairs we've had to do because of tree roots, and that's my primary concern, because the residents will come back and they say, who's going to fix my sidewalk? We didn't put that tree in there. And oftentimes if the road has edge drain or curb and gutter, any of that can be impacted. I get that the root system is not deep, but the edge drain is not deep on the side of a roadway as well. So I just want to add that caveat to it. Yes, Michelle's correct. We don't like to put trees on sewer mains or water mains. I understand that repairs are infrequent for the utilities, but when they are, it's detrimental because, as Michelle said, people become attached to their trees. But more the surface, the sidewalks. I mean, we've all seen sidewalks that buckle, and it's due to a tree root. That's our primary concern. Just want to kind of add that. So we'll work with whatever the Planning Commission desires. I do want to add that caveat. We just kind of give a recommendation.
Well, what have they done in the suburbs of Detroit for the last 50 years? I mean, some of the nicest neighborhoods you drive through in Livonia and Warren and Royal Oak have those trees that are just a few feet off the street and the canopies over them. And they, from an aesthetic, from a neighborhood, from just a comfort feel, I'm like totally in on that look. And I understand we're not any of those communities. This is, this is a suburb. This is not a city. But I think people enjoy the warmness and the look of their neighborhoods. So if on the form of what it looks like, I'm totally on moving those trees closer to the street. I get the function part. I'm just wondering what they've been doing in all those old communities for all these years, because they have it. And I'm not sure where their utilities are. That may be the answer to the question, but it's done everywhere.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Summer.
So typically, regarding, I know people in the Plymouth, Canton, Livonia area, if the sidewalk does get raised, it is the residents' position to correct that, either by cement sawing, so there's not that lip there for a trip hazard, or they could have it replaced by the city at their cost. Which is, I think the last time I heard an estimate was about $150.
Do you have a, Summer, do you have an opinion on what you'd like to see aesthetically, or do you thoughts on it?
I agree with Sue, and I prefer that look. I'm very familiar with it. And I haven't seen too many issues down that way for correcting it. And they were large trees that I'm thinking of.
Okay, thank you. Any more input on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can I just kind of make a comment, as I already did, but could there be an adjustment that there could be a happy medium that utilities could be positioned in a spot, maybe closer to the road or closer to the sidewalk, the trees as far away as possible, maybe even the sidewalk moved in a bit, maybe trees that would be chosen that would be slower growing, that would have different roots. Just, I guess, a thought if there could be any adjustments, you know, to kind of satisfy both of these in that same area.
Sue, you might have some thoughts on that. Are there plant selections?
There are. Different trees have different, more surface rooting, like everyone knows about the maples, typically are the ones that are buckling the sidewalk. One good thing I'm looking at the design is we have a 10-foot wide, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Perry, but it looks like we have 10 feet fortunately between the curb and the sidewalk. So that's a lot wider than what you typically see in Dearborn and Livonia. Usually those are 5 feet of lawn where they have the tree. So we have a lot wider area to allow for, you know, tree roots to grow. But yes, we can pick different types of trees. We can move things around. I think there is some, you know, concessions and ways to, you know, all work together.
All right. So I'm hearing we would prefer to see the trees closer to the street, between the sidewalk and the road, and there could be a possible tree selection that could aid in minimizing future issues. Did I get that right? Okay. Let's see here. Detention pond landscaping. I think that's where we are at the moment. Buffering and screening. I think we have not covered that. Any comments on item D, buffering and screening? Anything, Sue?
No, I looked out there. I felt that, you know, the screening on the north and south was already pretty much replaced the existing material, and the supplementing, as they've shown, should, you know, handle that. Screening fine, and the detention area did meet the ordinance, the way that they laid out the landscaping.
Okay. Any more comments on landscaping, anyone? Okay, let's move on to street light.
We did have some residents in the neighboring township express concerns about light trespass and stuff like that. I'm not a landscape architect, but do you feel that some of the concerns that were raised by other people with respect to the west, do you feel that their concerns are being addressed there?
To the west, Yes, I do. I feel we've got quite the distance. We've only got the two lights, the pole lights in the entrance, and the rest are from the residents, and I don't feel there should be a light trespass. There's no street lights in this development.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, let's look at the, well, we just hit street lighting there. It would appear as though we have a couple lights at the entrance. Any comments on that? Architectural and building materials. I'm now on packet page number 18. They, as I said earlier, they presented some renderings. Any comments on those feedback? They look similar to what we had seen before.
Yes.
They look very high quality, very nice looking units.
I agree.
Okay. Other requirements in the zoning ordinance, there's nothing else at that time. We do have some consulting reviews. We've got a DPW review. Mr. Perry, any comments on that, the engineer's letter or the fire authority letter? You guys okay with those?
Yeah, we're fine with those comments.
Any additional comments from the planning commission on any of those review letters? I've reached the end of the staff review letter. Are there any additional questions or comments for or from anyone here? Planning commission, consultants, Troy?
So there's a lot to take in, a lot of great comments tonight, and I really appreciate everyone being patient, helping us work through this, and I really appreciate everyone taking time to come out and send in comments. Hopefully we can ultimately reach something that is good for the community.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. We always like to have a lot of participation. We like the community to know what's going on in their community, in our community. And it's very rewarding to see all these people take the time to log in tonight and take their evening and participate and comments and suggestions. There is a lot of information here that was talked about this evening. I'm gathering that we need to send the applicant back to do a few things. And any thoughts from any of the commissioners this evening on where this should go?
Larry, can I back up and maybe ask for comment from other planning commissioners?
Yep.
So that would be back to page 11, bottom of page 11 or top of page 12. And it was regarding the setbacks and my comments earlier regarding the proposed setback from 40 feet to 23 and a half feet from the along the internal road collector, I think to the point of the closest envelope. So I'm just curious on others' opinions on, just because I've had some experiences of being in similar developments, and as I'm a guest, parking to visit, there just not being enough room for my vehicle. And so I've been through some other developments and taken a look at them, and a lot of them, there isn't a great amount of space that you can fit a smaller car, but I'm just kind of curious of opinions from commissioners, please.
Well, Tom, to answer your concern, I agree with you. We have some developments in this township which don't accommodate very easily people who come to visit them. You're restricted to parking in the, a couple of cars parking in the driveway. However, you have to take into consideration that this is a dimension that is proposing a building envelope, and we're not quite sure where the house will be. Location. So the envelope is 23.5 feet from the right of way, the road. But that doesn't mean necessarily that the house will be situated 23 feet away. So I have confidence in the developer that he recognizes, building these other developments that he should see a need to put the house setback further than
Thank you, Michael.
Yep. Wayne, could you clarify one thing before we continue with the other commissioners? The comment you made about the length of the vehicle, the sidewalk, is it in the right of way or outside of the right of way?
The sidewalk is proposed within the road right of way for development. It's currently provided a half a foot inside the right of way line. That's the back of the walk. And as was pointed out, we have, I think it's actually 10.5 feet between the edge of the walk and the back of the curb. And if this is truly a concern that planning commissioners, you want an extra couple of feet, adjustment of the sidewalk location can be accommodated. Once again, we place it here just based upon the typical township standard. Its location can be varied, but it's within the road right of way.
But your 23.5 feet is the, let's just call it worst case clearance dimension from the front of the building envelope to the house side of the sidewalk. When you say 23.5 feet?
No, we have shown on here that we have 23.5 feet between the building envelope, which is the closest portion of the house, and the right-of-way line.
Right.
So you're actually 24 feet from the sidewalk to, say, the closest face of the garage. That's the half foot in there. But once again, if there's a dimension that you're more comfortable with than 23.5, we can accommodate moving the sidewalk a foot or two. I mean, I don't think we're talking about putting in 35-foot cars because you don't really have those. They're all within the 20-foot range.
Yeah. Now, my question was just to make sure that everybody understood the sidewalk was inside the right of way. It wasn't outside of the right of way. So I just wanted to make sure everybody in the meeting here tonight understood that was the dimension. So, okay, I would continue on and answer Tom's question, please. Are you comfortable with the dimension they're showing?
So Mr. Chairman, if I understand Mr. Perry's comment, it sounds like from the face of the garage or the face of the building envelope to the nearest side of the sidewalk closest to the house, does it sound like it's about 24 feet? Is that what I got from that?
Yes.
Okay. And that's not and that would be as designed. We wouldn't be considering moving the sidewalks, correct?
That's what he has drawn.
Thank you. Because I don't want to get into the good conversation we just had about room for trees and utilities at the current sidewalk location. So no, I guess I would, I appreciate that clarification. And in that case, I would be, I could remove my comment of not really being comfortable with that offset. So I appreciate that clarification.
Okay. Is everybody else comfortable with the dimension that they're showing at this time, leaving the sidewalk where it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's tight, but yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I do have one.
Absolutely.
So I have a problem with the gates and the gated community. It seems like you're trying it's not a sense of community, you know, when there's a gate there. It's not a welcoming factor. And I think there's a perceived, you know, and a perceived, you know, place of, you know, you're not inclusive to our community and we want you to stay out. And I could see where the other development, if there was a gate, you know, it's not a welcoming factor. I think it promotes a lack of diversity for that community and the surrounding communities. If you see something that's gated off, that's just, and it's just, you know, I don't think, you know, Heartland wants to, you know, have everything gated off. I think, you know, people move here to be included in the community, not sectioned off from it.
Any thoughts on that? I know we've struggled with gates here. We've talked about it.
Well, during the concept review of this development, I was originally opposed to the connector between Walnut Ridge and this development. As, excuse me, I that here's that when St. John's service was over, there was a huge backup on Hacker Road to wait for the light to change, and there may be desire to utilize the villas in the street system and continue on into Walnut Ridge, and then be able to access the M59, jump other traffic, you know, bypass the congestion. I live near Highland, and there is a subdivision on the corner of Hickory Ridge M59 called Pineville. And they have an entrance across the street from the golf course, M59, and that subdivision ultimately ends up exiting on Hickory Ridge Road, and that is a huge problem in that development. They have been to the township board, Highland Township Board, several times. They've constructed some signs that said that it's a private roadway, you know, through traffic not allowed. But none of that is enforceable. So, as I say, during the concept phase of this, I had strong concerns about connecting these two developments. And as I reviewed the prints tonight, I have to say that I'm in favor of the gates. The gates are not controlled. You don't have coded access per se, and it will be a detriment or a deferral to have through traffic try to take that shortcut is my thought process. If you were trying to find a quick and easy way out from the parking lot, you certainly would find that you would probably spend more time going through the gate series than what it was actually worth. So in my opinion, I don't have a problem with the gate for that reason.
Comments on gates? Anybody?
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment not on the gates.
They're fine.
I just wanted to point out, obviously, the two big things I would like to see looked at. One is the landscaping, to try to address the concerns that Sue raised. I respect her opinion, and I think that we can try to work through that. The second thing I would like to see is a more detailed review on this stormwater design. As I looked through all of the reviews from the different agencies, the engineering review was the most vague, I think. And so if I would like to see more detailed review that can show that it actually can work as it's proposed, because that can be a pretty substantial change if you run into issues, you know, in a drainage review and you need to make major changes that can change things significantly. So that would be another thing that I would like to see, if maybe the engineer can get into a more in-depth review before we're asked to approve this, if we don't approve it tonight. Thank you.
I don't know where, I'm not prepared to, I don't know where everybody is, so I'll throw this out there. I'm not prepared to make a recommendation to the board this evening. I don't know where the rest of you are. There are a couple things to do. We haven't really talked about opinions and thoughts. We had a significant number of written communication to us from our residents, and we've heard from those speaking this evening about this connector road and the gates and the comments. We've heard from Troy and myself on the connector road and how we feel about it and the comprehensive plan. We have a proposal from the developer. Are we comfortable with him going back and doing some of the things as like Michelle has requested on stormwater and landscaping? Are we comfortable with them proceeding with this connection as it is? What are our thoughts on that? They probably each need to say a little something. Gonna make me go first?
Well, from a landscaping perspective, the entrance off of Hacker Road, I would like to see an updated landscaping plan where they show how close they can put a tree in the safe zone that Sue was describing it. I'm having a hard time visualizing where that tree or tree might end up.
Well, you avoided that really well, Mike. Any comments in regards to personal feelings or against neutral on this secondary access? We've heard a number of people here tonight bring that up.
Mr. Chairman, I'll comment on it. I greatly appreciate all of the people who spoke out today. I have kids of my own, and I actually live in a subdivision where I feel like it connects two roads that people use it for that purpose. But I also envision if I were to live in Walnut Ridge and, you know, I picture my own kids playing there, and even as they grow in the safety from a traffic perspective of turning out onto M59 versus having a route to go to Hacker Road where it's safer and there's a traffic light. I do feel like that's a strong benefit that I hope that people would realize if or when this comes to fruition. I tried to weigh it in my head because I have kids as well that are pretty young, and that is how I felt about the road. If I were there and living there, I feel that it would actually be safer for from a travel perspective as kids are learning to drive and in the neighborhood. And my hope is that with the layout as it was discussed before, with the villas, it does kind of promote a slower traffic pattern. So my hope is that people aren't speeding through it the way that it's envisioned. It's tough to say. I mean, I guess those would be my thoughts on it.
I comment the same as Michelle just said, and also for all the reasons Troy brought forth, about the trash pickup and mailmen and just all these different going around. But especially because I grew up in a neighborhood that it was all streets, all were connected. You had so many different ways to get through your neighborhood, and it still was a neighborhood. But I think that's one of the goals our community is seeking, to have a network, a walkable network, a driving, have those goals. And so for that, I do want to encourage the connection.
And so, Mr. Commissioner, or Chairman, I'm sorry, I could comment the same way, with maybe some, the caveat that I also was a planning commissioner when Walnut Ridge was laid out and, came to us, and we had concluded, and for the similar reasons, Larry, that we had those discussions that how busy M59 is, that it would be a benefit for the Walnut Ridge folks, if I can say it that way, to get over to Hacker, not just for us adult drivers, but for the newer drivers, right? So I think that's a plus when it comes to that safety. And I think, as Sue just mentioned, what is a neighborhood? What is a neighbor? Is it just walking, or is it passing through? So I like the idea. I appreciate, everyone's concerns for sure. My kids are just a little bit older now, but I lived a little more rural, or live in a little more rural subdivision, but I'm for sure concerned about safety. Sidewalks are important, and whether it's, different activities, we can use those for sure. So I'm supportive of that connector. When it comes to the landscape, I think Sue painted a good picture on the entrance coming up Hacker to try to close that up a little bit. And if that's through landscaping, I for sure respect her knowledge in that field, as that's her profession. And when it comes to the extensive conversation about the trees and the utilities between the sidewalk, I just want to see what we can do there to try to have them both, join in that same area. So, but those would be my comments.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
There you are.
I would, since it looks like we've asked the applicant to kind of do some changes, some modifications, I would just ask the planning commissioners to maybe listen under public comment later tonight. Maybe some of the residents didn't know the history of why there's a connection. Maybe they didn't, they had no understanding. And maybe some of them will have a rebuttal, if you want to call it that, to some of that. And I just asked that maybe you planning commissioners would listen to that, keep an open mind, and hear what they might have to say on that as well. And I'm not sure, but it sounds like maybe we're not going to actually act on this tonight, and it'll come back, and certainly take time. That's a very important topic, and it's really worth taking some time to really think about it.
It is. Mike, did you want to add something?
Yeah. I think it should be pointed out for those people in Walnut Ridge who were concerned with construction traffic that in no way will construction equipment, the villa, be passing through Walnut Ridge.
Very good point. Thank you. Yes, I would agree. And Troy, the reason I asked is since we were sending the applicant, in my opinion, I gathered that people weren't ready to act on this evening, but I do think that we need to send the applicant out with some feeling of where the commission is this evening. It wouldn't do them any good if we said all one thing and they did another in regards to that access road. So with that, are there any other questions or comments for either Mr. Perry? Mr. Perry, would you like to make any more comments this evening? Troy?
I don't have any in particular this time, Mr. Fox, except to reiterate your comment that I would appreciate whatever direction the Planning Commission can give us. Obviously, there are a number of issues on the table here. The easiest one being taking our street trees and putting them between the sidewalk and the curb. That's not a big problem. But particularly with regard to this access connection between the developments, that obviously we need to have some guidance and direction on before we can move forward. So your thoughts are appreciated.
I didn't hear anybody speaking against the access. Is there somebody that wants to give some direction in that way?
Well, let me clarify. I'm in favor of the access only if it has the electric gate. That should not be wide open access.
Okay. Mr. Perry, did you get enough off of what we had said in that then, or no? Are you in regards to the access?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Is there any other issue you want some clarity on?
The rest of the comments, I think we can work through.
Okay. For the benefit of, maybe we better all agree here. Are we in favor of Mr. Perry returning at some other date with a modified plan? All those, raise your hand. Okay. So for the public's benefit, we are not going to be acting on this evening. Those that have stayed with us, we do have a call to the public coming up here rather quickly. This item will return to our agenda. The difference between tonight's meeting and a future meeting is tonight was a public hearing. So most of you that were in, I believe it's 300 feet of this development, Troy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, received a written notification that this meeting was taking place. The next meeting is not a public hearing, so there is no written notification that will be going out. So the method by which to keep track of what's going on here, if you're familiar with the township website or the cable channel, is to watch for the Planning Commission agendas. It will always be advertised as site plan application number 20-011, the Villas of Heartland. So it will not come under any other name. It will not come under anything else but that. So if that were to pop up and somebody were keeping track, your methods of communication through one another with your neighborhood emails and such would be the best way to do that. As I said, today was a little different because it was a public hearing. So by the hand shown by the Planning Commission, we're going to send Mr. Perry on his way for the evening. We're going to conclude this particular agenda item. As I said, keep track of our agenda in the future. I can't imagine that it will come back in the next week or two. This will take much longer than that. Troy would probably nod his head and agree. Probably Mr. Perry would also. So keep an eye out for that. With that, thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the future.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, all those that are in the public out there now, we're moving on to item 8, which is call to the public. So this is another opportunity for you to speak if you wish to. This can be either the agenda item 7A or it can be anything else you'd like to do. So let's go with the same method as before. If you have your video on, raise your hand. We'll let you speak. If not, if you're not using video, just speak up and we'll try and get a hold of you and get you in here. Anybody like to say anything tonight? Okay, I don't have names this time, but you spoke before. Raising your, that guy.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Mike
right,
Mitchell,
just
good
give
to
us
see
your
you.
name.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and Troy and all the members, the Planning Commission members for the feedback. It was really enjoyable to sit here and go through one of these for my first time, just recently moving to Heartland Township. Thank you for the history. Again, as a homeowner, I still strongly oppose the annex. I know you guys from the planning commissioners seem to be towards favor on that, but I don't know what else I can do to, again, express my concerns on the annex portion, and I do appreciate the history lesson on some of the back history. If need be, I can and will follow up with all the homeowners, all 64 of us here in Walnut Ridge, and then also additionally follow up with emails as well based on that history. We can also get some additional comments back to Mr. Langer just with that history, and then any change of opinion. I'm highly doubting that there will be homeowner change of opinion, but I'm not going to speculate that. So thank you for that back history. And then additionally too, I appreciate the comments about the traffic flow. However, I just don't see myself actually going through Villa Hills all the way down to Hacker to go left and then come back towards my house to go eastbound on M59. So I appreciate the comments there. It just doesn't, for me, I guess logically, I don't know why I would go backtracking all the way to the light just to catch the light to come back past, rather than just maybe wait to make that little bit longer left turn out of my subdivision. And then out of my subdivision also, going westbound would be a right-hand turn. So from a traffic standpoint or turn standpoint, making right-hand turns is obviously easier than the left-hand turn standpoint. So it's just a couple points that I want to maybe agree to disagree, maybe, I guess I'd like to say as a comment to Larry and some of the others that said maybe opening up the annex to Villa, the villas would actually promote easier traffic flow for residents in Walnut Ridge going all the way to Hacker, rather than just going out to M59 and going right turn down and then also coming backtracking. So thank you again for all the comments and concerns from the homeowners of Walnut Ridge.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Anyone else this evening? Oh, yep, I don't have a name, but you did speak before.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, Mr. Nykel.
Yep. Yeah, I listened to everything everyone had to say, and I'm still very much concerned about this water running over the road. They're saying that the retention pond is going to handle it up to a 2-year flood, or 200-year flood, basically. Looking at the size and dimension of everything, it doesn't seem feasible, but I know that they have an overflow pipe, and this overflow pipe will eventually, it will get to that level. It's going to be retaining water. Sooner or later, it's going to get up that way, and it's going to dump in. And so I'm very concerned about this, and because when you fill in these wetlands, that water has to go somewhere. And so I'm very, very much concerned about all this water. And if it does damage to this pond, then we have to have some kind of a recourse, because there's going to be data taken on this pond to make sure that it stays in good health and stays in good standing. And I don't want to see anything happen. So this is going to be something that's going to be a very big issue. I have talked to the Drain Commission about this, and I've also talked with the state about this. So they have their knowledge about it, and they've been giving me direction on what to do with it. I want to make sure that this is very much understood, that this could become an issue. And if we get flooded, then there's somebody's going to have to take care of this, because we've never had an issue before, and I've never had any problems with clarity in this water or anything with it. So even algae blooms could be a problem because of nitrates flowing in here from lawn fertilizers and other things like that. So I wanted to make sure that I brought this up to the board. This is all reported, that this could be an issue in the future, and we're going to be watching for this very closely. So that's about all I have to say on this time. Thank you for your time, and we'll see about this in the future.
Thank you very much. Anyone else this evening? Last call. I don't see or hear anybody. Hello? Okay, we're going to close our call to the public and move to item 9, planners report. Roy, did you have anything for us? Nothing this evening?
Nothing.
Committee reports, comments, any from the planning commission? Any thoughts? All right, seeing none, we'll move to adjourn. I need a motion, please, and a second.
So moved.
Support.
All righty. We have a motion from Mitchell, a second from Murphy, and a third from LaRose. All of those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and have a great evening. Good night.
Night.
Hey, Larry,
Yeah.
so was there anybody else who was having difficulty getting in?
Oh, I believe, well, there were, some of the public had said they did, but planning commissioners, no.
Yeah, I ended up sending you a text to let you know that I was going to attend, and but each time it said the meeting had not started yet, and I'm going, holy smokes, it's 5 after 7.
Well, you know what, Mike? You probably did what I did a couple weeks ago, because we have a meeting next Thursday. If you clicked on the email you received today, that's the link to next week's meeting.
I checked on that because I'm afraid that I was doing that, and verified that no, I was clicking on the meeting today, but when it tried to access the website, it had a date of January 26th of 21. It wasn't even, so then I went back to last week's, and the date on it said, last week's date. I couldn't find an agenda who had the calendar date of March 11th. So I ended up shutting down and then restarted the computer and tried to come back in, and then all of a sudden it popped in. It allowed it to happen. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that I struggled for 20 minutes.
Well, I did get your text, but I was in the meeting, and I'm like, I read it, and I'm like, well, he's going to get in. He's going to get in. Then when we got to the public, one of the Mr. Nike, I can't say his name, but the last gentleman that spoke had mentioned there were some people that weren't able to get in.
Yeah.
And my technology stops and starts with the on and off button.
Yeah. So does mine. So anyway, I just wondered if anybody else had any problems. So we'll see.
All right. I think we're good. See everybody next Thursday. We have another one of these.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great job,
All right.
Larry.
Larry.
Great job.
Larry.
Hey, yes, Mr. Nichol. Yeah.
Yes. The township commissioner for Osceola Township was trying to get in, and he could not get in. He tried multiple ways to get in by phone. He tried to get in by WebEx, and he called me, and I was trying to walk him through it, and we never could hook up. The gentleman that wound up coming over here to the house that sat down and took over in my spot, he couldn't get on either. So there was another couple other people, and Greg Light, who was another person that turned in a presentation for you, he couldn't get in either. So we had 3 different people that couldn't get in, and they were trying everything. Also, I think from Walnut Ridge, Matt and Sue Harris was trying to get in, and they couldn't get in. They kept telling them that the meeting hasn't started yet, and the meeting was already well involved. So there's something going on.
In fact, Larry, I tried calling that number, that WebEx number, to connect by phone, and I got the same response. Meeting hasn't started yet.
Okay, I don't know. I went in through the township website. I didn't go through an email of our agenda. I went to heartlandtwp.com, went to meetings and agendas, went there, and then it came up, and then it brought me right in.
That's exactly the way I was attempting to do it. That's the way I always have done it. But
yeah, that's interesting.
But it wouldn't show me today's agenda. When I got into the WebEx, it always gave me a previous date rather than
Okay.
today's.
We'll certainly take a look at that and get that corrected for the next meeting. I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. We'll ensure that it is a robust connection. I will say it's definitely not limited by the participants. We can host up to 250 people per meeting. Not that I ever want to get that big, but we can. So I know it wasn't a matter of fact of like we hit a limit or something of that nature, but we will certainly look into that. Thanks for letting us know.
Okay.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night. Thank
Okay.
you.